Alright, so we are picking up right where we left off last week. And we were going over in Procedure 6, General Tips for Teaching Anger Management Skills. And we went over keep your cool, be patient, take the time to educate or teach as well as correct. Use active listening. Don't expect perfect results right away. Talk to your child about his or her behavior and how to plan to help him demonstrate proper conduct. Institute calm down time. Remember to use rules and reward system. Process the experience. And now we are on page 57 with be creative when giving out consequences. All right. So before we read point 10, I want to just go back over to the procedure and refresh our minds a little bit on exactly what we are doing. All right, so it says, ask students to predict what an effective anger management plan might consist of. I know we went over a lot of facts about that last week. Record answers on the board. Have volunteers read general tips for teaching anger management skills on pages 54 to 58. Focus on the 10th point, be creative when giving out consequences. All right, so we're going to stop reading the procedure there and turn over to page 57. Be creative when giving out consequences. It says here, not every misbehavior deserves the same consequence. Stop and think about what consequence can best teach the child. Remember, we're not giving out consequences to punish the child. We're giving out consequences so the child or the children can remember what they did, why they shouldn't do or do what they did or did not do, and continue from there. For example, your 10-year-old argued with you when you told him that he was not allowed to leave your supervision. Even after you instructed him to stop arguing, he persisted. Of course, this is outward rebellion. So technically, he could receive a spanking, but a far more beneficial consequence would be to instruct him to write an essay about the importance of obedience and why it is important to be supervised. Be sure that you curtail all other activities until he completes the essay to the best of his ability. Taking away privileges for a short period of time is an appropriate consequence. But a note of caution, you should never deny a child food or water as a consequence for misbehavior. Denying food and water to a child is abuse. All right? And this is just one example of what a parent could do. Remember, every child is different. What might work for one might not work for the other. As it says here, spanking doesn't always work. I know some children, they say, well, if I do this, my mom will just give me a spanking and she'll just continue on. When a consequence is given out, it must be thought out carefully as to how will the child learn from this experience to ensure that they never do it again. Or when a situation like that arises, they stop and think as to what they have to do. All right. So let us go back over to the procedure real quick. I want to read the rest of this procedure before we continue on. It says, have students form groups of 3 to 4 in each group. Distribute a cutout from page 7C to each group and instruct students to brainstorm creative consequences for the behavior on their cutout. Allow time for students to share their answers within the group. And this is a great part for a teacher to not only see where their students are learning-wise in the PSO solution, to also see their thought process when they are dealing with children as well. So on page 7C, it is the page right across from the procedures. All right, and so there's 5 cutouts. We're just going to read through the cutouts real quick and just go through simple things that a parent, guardian, or teacher can do. All right, so the first one says, Your 8-year-old has gotten into the habit of taking snacks from the shelf whenever you are at the store, and makes an ugly fuss about getting them. You have told him many times that you want this to stop, but he continues to do it. And the first time I read that scenario, I said, 8 years old, they should know better. But that's just because when I was 8 years old, I knew much better than to go into the store and show out on my parents. But this is not the case for every individual. And the point to these cutouts here is to show why it's important to start teaching early on. But as we know, many of us has come from many walks of life, many different ages to learn the peaceful solution, and that includes children as well. And it's not always that way. Many people, many walks of life, learning the peaceful solution at different ages. But as we can tell, with each age, there is a book in the peaceful solution for it as well. Alright, so number 2, it says, you tell your 10-year-old child to clean his room before supper. After half an hour, you check his progress, only to find his room untouched and him reading a book and eating a chocolate bar. This is an ongoing problem. Now, one might think, well, the child isn't really doing anything. He's doing something constructive. He's reading a book, right? You know, most parents would beg their child to pick up an actual book and read. But this is not the case. The parent told him to clean his room before supper. But instead, he sat down and read a book and was eating a chocolate bar. You know, these days in society, it's not a book anymore. It's either they're still on their phone, or they're still playing that video game, or they're still watching that show. And people have made jokes about it. I remember there was this one thing that was going around. It was of this little girl. She couldn't be no more than 13, 14. Her father told her to clean out her room, right? So he left, came back, and she still didn't do it. And he said, I thought I told you to clean out your room. And the little girl turned and told him, I thought I told you when I was done playing with this game, I would clean out my room. So, not knowing the peaceful solution, the father picked up her guitar and he smashed the television. And this was placed on social media as a joke. It went around multiple times. People have recreated the videos in multiple different ways. But when you sit and think of it, how we must teach our children when something is to be done, it is to be done in an orderly manner for when the parent says so. Alright, so going down to the third one, it says, your 6-year-old daughter's teacher has contacted you several times to report that your daughter is constantly getting out of her seat and talking in class. You have spoken to her before about following all the rules. And when I read this, I remembered it was a couple classes ago where we went over the spoon method, where it basically teaches children there is a place and time for when one is to talk, when one is to share their thoughts and feelings, and when one is to sit down and when listen to what others have to say. And this would be a perfect example of putting the spoon method, whether it's in the home or a classroom, teaching children there is a time and place for everything. And also for all of these, this is perfect to where the rules and reward system would come in perfectly handy as well. Alright, next one, it says, when you correct your 4-year-old, he throws a tantrum, kicks and screams. The last time he behaved in this manner was at his grandmother's house, where he knocked over and broke an expensive vase. And I believe we went into this extensively in our last class, where it said, it was one of the points, point 7. Institute a calm down time. Now, the calm down time would vary depending on the level that the child is at. But this is where a parent really has to know what their child needs. And we could reference page 54 for that. What does the child need? Alright, and then the last one. Your 14-year-old keeps abusing her phone privileges. You remind her over and over about the phone rules, but you but you still feel she needs a phone for the sake of communicating with you for safety reasons. And when I was going through this, my mother reminded me of when I got my first phone. Now, I got my first phone at a late age compared to some ages that people get their phones now. I believe I was 13. And I was so excited. It was one of those slide phones. I don't even think they make those anymore. It was one of those slide phones that you slide up, you text on it, and you slide it back down. And I was so excited when I got my first phone because all my friends had phones. I didn't have a phone. But I didn't let it bother me because, I realized there's a time and place for everything. But there was a huge but to it. It wasn't a regular phone. It was one of those pay-to-go phones. So if you called somebody, it charged you $1. If you sent a text, it charged you 25 cents. And it didn't and to go on the internet, I think it was 10 cents for 30 minutes or something like that. And they only put amount of money on it, so I couldn't exactly waste all that because they'd be wondering, what'd you do with all of that? But it taught me a sense of responsibility to that I don't always need a phone, or to show that when I did get a phone where it was unlimited text or calls or I could access the internet, I knew what to do on the phone and what not to do on the phone. And that's the part where guardians and parents have to teach children. Now, these days, we live in a fast-paced society where you can walk into any store and you'll see a 4-year-old with a tablet that's bigger than your phone. Or they'll have a cell phone and they'll be texting on it. And when I was 6 years old, I don't even think they had texting yet. I can't remember. I'm not going to date myself. But I don't even think they had texting as advanced as they do now. So this one would be a really great one to go into because it's very relevant in today's society where we not only have texting to worry about, but we also have all forms of social media. You could connect to your friends on this app, and you connect to your friends on this app, and you can talk to someone who's around the other side of the globe, whatever time you want to. This is where parenting and having that open communication with children is very important. It teaches them that they know what is right and wrong. And as a parent, you can trust them to do what is right as based on what you have taught them. All right, so let's go back over to page 58. All right, and we're going to continue with the rest of the points. And before I read that, drawing one more point to point 10. It says, I added here where it talks about boundaries and rules, right? Now, boundaries and rules mean nothing if consequences are not in place. And when we hear consequences, we either think of spanking or something beyond that. But a consequence could be something as, a timeout for a 4-year-old, or going along those lines depending on the age of the child, to understand that what they did might have been wrong, what they said might have been disrespectful, or if they lose control of themselves, to help further gain that self-control that they desperately need. So consequences and boundaries are not the foundation of parenting, but consequences are only part of the parenting puzzle. But if you don't follow through with the consequences, you'll begin teaching your children that rules and boundaries don't really matter. And they'll continue to break the rules and develop negative behavior. And I thought of this of point 3 on page 55. Take the time to teach as well as correct. And the children, I say this almost every class because it's true, they're very smart. And they're very, very observant. And they like, in lack of a better word, they like to test parents or test their guardians to see how far they can get. And I believe the other teacher mentioned this last week as well, where they'll think, well, if I ask this time and she says no, maybe I can ask next time and she'll say yes. Well, last time I did this, she just told me not to do this and she didn't really correct me or give me a consequence. So maybe if I go this far, she won't mind. So they continue to do that to push the boundaries, to see where the parent comes in to say, no, you don't do this. You're supposed to do this. Yes, you do this, but you don't do this. Or yes, you say this or not say this. All right, so it's always about consistency, as we'll go over in point 11 on page 58. It says, be consistent. This tip is the last on the list, but certainly not the least in importance. This is like the glue that holds all positive parenting together. Your consistent positive intervention tells children that you love them enough to correct, teach, and guide them to proper behavior. Never let inappropriate behavior slide. It will diminish your effectiveness as a parent and role model. And this is where we have to ask ourselves the question, why is consistency so important? Why is consistency so important? And it's just like, I like to relate things, big things, to small things so people can understand it. And I think of it as teaching your child to brush their teeth. You know, you teach your child to brush their teeth when they're young. But if you teach them to brush their teeth every once in a while, do you think they'll see the importance of brushing their teeth? No, they won't. We all know what occurs when we don't brush our teeth or take care of our teeth as well too. So that's just a small example, but it goes to show as to why consistency is important. If inconsistent, your children will see that. Remember, they observe everything that we do, and you allow them to take advantage of that. Children like to push what they know they shouldn't do, but they like to find that tiny gray area where she might not say anything to me. All right, and this is where consistency comes in. And it's one of the simplest ways to improve a child's behavior is to be more consistent. Children love their parents to be consistent as they are able to predict how they will act. A consistent approach to discipline helps put children in control of behavior. It gives them the reminder to stop and think, if I were to do this, what is my parent going to do? Consistency means, as a parent, we follow through and we do all that we say we will. It means resisting giving children second and third opportunities when they break the rules or behave poorly. When we let children get away with 2 or 3 infractions of the rules, we often come down very hard eventually, which causes resentment. As if you've told a child not to do this, you've told them not to do this over and over again, and when you correct them sternly, they're wondering why. Act early and prevent poor behavior from escalating is the best approach. And that's where it always goes back to consistency. And it's not just about staying on top of your child. It's teaching them. Remember, it's all about a teaching experience. It's teaching them to stop and think, what would my parent or guardian say if I did this? What would my parent guardian say if I said this? All right, many of the previous tips are applicable for children of all ages, and we could even slice ourselves in there, adults of all ages as well too. Generally speaking, children should not be beyond the stage of throwing a tantrum by the age of 6. So that got me thinking as to what are the different stages in the human brain development. So I looked it up. They said there are 5 stages of the human brain. 1 in the womb. 2nd is birth to the age of 6 years old. And this says when a child is 6 years old, their brain is 95% of its adult weight. To avoid emotional consequences that might manifest later in life, caregivers should consistently, I didn't put that word in there, they put that word in there, consistently provide a safe and nurturing environment where open communication is encouraged and the child is well loved. And that goes that consistency, continue to educate the child. Then they have 7 to 22 years old. And I found this part really interesting. It says the part of the brain that controls impulses and decision making, the prefrontal cortex, is the last to mature. And we've heard that it takes approximately 25 years for an individual to fully come into maturity. So all that time where a parent is, let's say, 18, 19, all those ages, all those years, that child, whether they consider themselves a child or not, is still fully dependent on the parent in a way to continue to teach them what is right or wrong, whether it's through words or actions. And then the fourth one is 23 to 65, and then 65 and older. And those are the 5 stages of the human brain. So they're saying here, by the age of 6, children should be beyond the age of throwing a tantrum. So if we teach them from the womb all the way up to 6 years old, starting with the peaceful solution, I'm not saying your child will be perfect, but close enough. So they know, yes, there will be outbursts. They're children. This is where we teach them that you have to control how you're feeling to use it, express it into words. All right? So by throwing a tantrum is only one manifestation of anger. Children show anger in many different ways. Consider the following. And remember, we went over last week as well as, they're angry because something was said or done that they didn't agree with or they didn't completely understand. And that is why we're going through these tips as well to show how it's important to tell when a child is angry, to get to the main source of the problem and talk the child through it. It's all about a talking experience. And I'll probably say this again, but as at my age, or teenagers going into 20s, mid-20s, however old, we like to think talking is just too much. If I express how I'm feeling, no one will understand. And we sit, and we have these little voices in our heads. Well, if you do this, well, no, you're not supposed to do this. And it's a constant battle. But if you teach your child to come to you or to talk it out or basically have that open communication, it's much better than trying to solve it on your own. And funny enough, I learned that fully when learning a new language. When you learn a new language, you review the information that you've been given and you think you know it. Or there's a part where you go over and over and over that you're not quite sure of. And you say, well, I'll never get this. And then someone comes to you, well, explain it to me. And you explain it to them. And by the time you're done explaining it to them, you realize that you've had the solution all along. You just needed that verbal communication to talk it out, to realize that you did have the answer. And that is the point we're trying to get our children at, to realize that once they know and follow the peaceful solution, the answers are all up in their heads already. It's just choosing to do what is right by having that open communication with the parent or the guardian. And at the end of the day, as much as we think about it, it's not that hard to open our mouths and say, well, when this occurred, I felt this way. And we can start at that at an early age. Children are very vocal with how they express themselves. So if you catch that early on, as they get older, they can do it as well too. All right. So going on, it says, consider the following. Well, she hit me first. He kept calling me names, so I called him a name too. It's not my fault. He tripped me, so I got up and punched his lights out. If he didn't want to get hit, he shouldn't have yanked it from me. It's mine. The bus was late, and my teacher started to hassle me about being tardy. So yeah, I told her to get off my back. And that reminded me of the statement, being sarcastic has never gotten anyone anywhere. I've learned that the hard way a couple of times. It never gets a person anywhere. And it reminded me of the example that one of our peaceful solution teachers gave, where words can be like paper. You can crumble it up and then open it out, straighten it as much as you want, but it's still always there. All right, so going down, it says, without self-control and effective anger management skills, we justify poor ways we handle anger, often blaming it on people and circumstances in our lives. And at times we even seek to take revenge. Children of all ages need to understand that they cannot blame the way they respond to anger on the things that others do. That is immoral to retaliate in any way. Therefore, another key element in teaching anger management to children, especially to those who are older and more mature, is to help them realize that they are responsible for the way they respond to situations that make them angry. And remember, no one ever makes you angry. It is a choice. And we can find that on page 58 of the self-control unit. Children also need to know that retaliation is wrong, and we will make the problem worse. In other words, you might not be able to control the fact that someone else tripped you, but you can control your response and not hit back. You choose how to respond to anger. And this is never an easy lesson to teach or do yourself, but we always have to remember, people can say, people can do anything, but we have to control how we respond as an individual, and we have to pass that on to children as well. Retaliation in any form, whether verbal or physical, should never be an option to how we respond to anger. Children often feel that if they do not retaliate in some way, others will take advantage of them. But the truth is, retaliation only brings more retaliation. And in today's society, children as young as 6 years old have brought weapons to school to get even with a peer. And before I turn it over to the other teacher, I want to read this article. And I want you to pay attention very carefully as to what occurred in this article. And it says, girl, 15, dies in Walmart stabbing. 4 other girls arrested as police link crime to social media. And this is found on Fox News. 4 Louisiana teenagers have been arrested in connection with a fatal stabbing of a 15-year-old girl at a local Walmart over the weekend. The 15-year-old victim and several other girls began fighting inside a Walmart superstore when one of her attackers stabbed her. The victim was rushed to an area hospital but could not be saved. The sheriff later said that her attackers had stolen weapons from the store, though it was not immediately clear if the shoplifters' items included the blade used in the murder. The sheriff said it was not a difficult case to solve because of social media activity surrounding the stabbing. And listen to this point, because this is where it draws back to the last cutout that we had on page 7C. It says, they put it all over social media. Our whole case is unfolded before us through live Facebook and Instagram. We have videos of everything that took place, and it is very disturbing, truly is. By Sunday, deputies had arrested 4 of the girls. Now, listen to their ages and think back, what were you doing at that age? And the ages were 12, 13, 13, and 14. In connection with the death, one of the 4 girls was charged with second-degree murder. Now, this is 12 to 14. Their lives are now beginning. They're now figuring out, what do I want to do for the next 20, 30, 40 years of my life? Now, that is not going to occur. Now, the main part of the article I wanted to get to, it says, the sheriff pleaded with parents to keep an eye out for their children and any crime relating to this, and urged them to help the police keep weapons out of their hands. The group of kids last night was ages 12 to 15. They came from all different backgrounds and races. Remember, crime or violence doesn't have a specific age. This is just a problem that we are dealing with kids having access to weapons. And the main important thing that I want you to take from this article, he said, I just don't feel like it's a police matter. This is a parenting issue. We're fed up with it, he continued, and later added, let's take control of our kids, all of us, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, a store owner. We can't let this occur again. So I want you to take that in mind as to what the next teacher has to say continuing with this, because we live in a society where this occurs on a regular basis, to where we rarely hear about these stories anymore unless it's a mass occurrence. But this is still children who, if they had been raised in the peaceful solution or started to teach the peaceful solution, this wouldn't have occurred. So with this, I'd like to turn it over to our next teacher.
Hello, everyone. So great to be joining with you. Let's give her another round of applause. She covered her points very well. And I was going to bring that article too, so I'm glad she introduced it under this section of retaliation. And think about what those children's home lives must have been like. For them to have that kind of violent and aggressive behavior in a store towards another person, just imagine what their home life must have been like. They must have been very aggressive at home. You know, I think a lot of parents today are afraid of their children. They've created these little monsters, you know, that's what people say, I've created a monster, what am I going to do now? And then these monsters grow up and then they become actually very dangerous, not only towards other members of their family, but also now in society. And we see this over and over again. It's a very serious matter, and you can see how lacking society is in the training of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. So let's go back to that paragraph down there on the bottom of page 58. Retaliation in any form, whether verbal or physical, should never, never, never be an option to how to respond to anger. Children often feel that they do not retaliate. If they do not retaliate in some way, others will take advantage of them. So you see the reasoning there. Is that a fully developed mind that thinks that way? No. And that is why children need guidance. Their brains are still developing. They are not fully capable of making decisions at times. And that's why the parents need to guide them and say, no, you don't need to retaliate. That's not going to help you. It's going to make it worse. And as she said, 2 wrongs will never make a right. So children often feel that if they do not retaliate in some way, others will take advantage of them. But the truth is, retaliation only brings on more retaliation. And in today's society, children as young as 6 have brought weapons to school to get even with a peer. Start now to teach your children that 2 wrongs never make a right. Teach them that also one of the true measures of being wise is to be able to think their way out of a situation. To think their way, not emotionally react to a way, but to respond after they think about it a bit. They get their emotions under control. They're thinking, okay, now what am I feeling? We went back to those questions, remember at the beginning. The mother asked herself, what am I feeling right now? And what does the child need? What is the child going through that would cause them to want to react in such a way? So we have to help them think their way out of a situation. And how do we do that first? We, as the parents, must demonstrate it first. And that means we have to get ourselves under control. That's why it says, how am I feeling? Little Susie's acting up, but what am I feeling? Get my emotions under control before I respond to the child. Because if I don't, we're going to have World War III explode right there. For truly anyone can resort to violence to deal with the conflict. That's so common today. It's become commonplace. Only making a wise choice, however, can solve the conflict and bring it to a peaceful conclusion. And isn't that what we want? We want to have a peaceful home environment. Everybody likes peace. Anybody say, oh, I don't like peace? No, don't give me peace, right? We all desire peace. So we have to work at it, and it starts right here. Because remember what the Peaceful Solution teaches. Every thought begins with a I'm sorry, every action, I said it backwards. Every action begins with a thought. I heard it, yes. So we're thinking all the time. But if we're not careful, those emotions will rise up so quickly and they block out any rational thinking at that point. And if we can't bring those emotions under control and learn how to calm them down, as I say, emotions are like wild horses. You do not want to let a wild horse run with you, guaranteed. So don't let your emotions run with you like a wild horse. Bring them under control, and then you can let your thinking process continue, or you can make a better choice. Does that make sense to everyone? Great. We're going to go back to procedure 7 now. Back on page 7B. And it says, discuss the 4 steps under as your children mature on page 59 to 60. Emphasize that when we teach children not to hide their needs behind the emotion of anger, see that emotion, and remember anger is a secondary emotion, so don't hide their needs behind their feelings. We are strengthening their ability to practice self-control. Go over with students. Here are a few ways you can teach your child to let go of anger. Page 60. Emphasize that we must model the correct behaviors for our children to emulate. And it does begin with us, because if you have an out-of-control child, and they can do all sorts of things as a symptom of what's bothering them, right? So whatever their out-of-control behavior is, if we ourselves come back at them with out-of-control behavior, it will only strike a match and blow up into a big fire. So that's where we, as the more mature adults, have to learn how to practice self-control, remain calm, and figure out how to communicate with them effectively and help them solve the problem peacefully. Okay, so now let's go back over to page 59. Because remember, anger is simply telling you that something is being said or done that you do not agree with. That's in self-control, page 72. Okay, so as your children mature, teach them to, and we've got some points right here, acknowledge the situation that makes them angry. Acknowledge, let them express, I am angry because. It's okay to let them verbalize that. They might say it in a way that you don't agree with, but that's okay. Let them have that opportunity to express themselves, okay? Because that is going to give them an opportunity to learn how to communicate more effectively. And let's go back up and look at that word mature. As your children mature, what does that word mature mean? Okay, mature means that they're going to be growing. They're not quite full grown yet, but they're going to be growing towards full grown. So acknowledge this situation as they're maturing and give them that opportunity to express why they are angry. That is so valuable. Don't just shut them off immediately and say, you shouldn't be angry right now. What are you angry for? There's no excuse for that. And they don't even get an opportunity to express themselves. You like to express ourselves. We all like to express ourselves, right? So we want to teach our children to be able to do that too. Because everyone feels anger for different reasons. Knowing what upsets them will help them plan appropriate ways to handle frustrating situations when they arise. For example, it is normal to get angry if someone takes your belongings without first asking and receiving permission. That's our rights of ownership. We've studied that in every program in the Peaceful Solution. Knowing that this is upsetting to you, you can kindly remind others to ask before using your belongings. A gentle reminder can avoid a conflict. And this means we're going to have to set our minds in advance. And sometimes, you know, when you have a child, let's say, for example, every time a child takes a shower, they leave the wet towel on the floor. And you see that wet towel on the floor again, and you go in and you say, I cannot believe you left that wet towel on the floor. You always leave that wet towel. You never hang up that wet towel. You've got the always and nevers flying around, right? Instead, just gently give them a gentle reminder, I see a wet towel on the floor again. That takes a lot of patience on our part, right? So we just gently remind them of these things. Give them an opportunity to fix it. Everybody likes to fix things. Give them an opportunity, no matter how they're maturing, what their age is, give them that opportunity to fix something. Okay, next point number 2, accept that they cannot control how other people behave or the choices they make. So they have to accept that they cannot control how other people behave or the choices they make. As much as we would like to control how other people behave, we can't, because we can only control ourselves, right? Teach your children that it is the only people they can control are themselves, because we have power over our own choices. Remember that. We have power over our own choices. Okay? And we can recognize this uncontrolled anger when it comes up, so we have to learn how to deal with it properly. Okay, so now let's go to point 3. Deal appropriately with that anger. And this is a big one for parents. This is a parenting training program. Remember that. It's for us to help our children. So we ourselves have to deal appropriately. This can be done in several ways. Encourage your child to talk to you. Circle that word talk. And we don't have to interrupt. We don't have to solve their problems. We can just listen to them. Listening is such an important skill. Talk to you or some other trustworthy person when they feel angry. So if they can talk about it, you can talk through that anger. And it really can help a lot. This is your opportunity to use active listening to help your child understand his or her feelings. Teach your children that it is okay to ask for help to handle a situation that overwhelms them. And we as parents can ask for help. It's okay. You can ask for help from the Peaceful Solution Guidance Committee. Anybody that you can feel trustworthy to talk to, get help and say, I've got this situation at home. I don't know what to do about it every time, and then explain what you're dealing with. And then together you can come up with a more peaceful solution to it. Okay, so teach your children that it is okay to ask for help to handle a situation that overwhelms them. Help them identify those they can ask for help. For example, when siblings have a conflict at home, they can seek help from mom or dad. If they are in a work situation, a supervisor, or in a school, a teacher or a guidance counselor is appropriate. Encouraging older children, especially teens, to get guidance from other approved adults helps them to see other views of making the wrong right. And think about that situation at that Walmart store. There were peers in there, right? Well, I'm upset with her peer. I think I should go do. Now, that peer is also one whose brain is developing, so they are not going to have a rational mind at that point to say, no, we don't want to do this. We're going to cause harm. And so they become like a pack of coyotes, if you will, and they go together and do something that is inappropriate. So that is not where you want to look for your guidance. You want to look for older, more mature people that can help guide you in these situations. Okay, let's go down to the next one, okay? Speak respectfully and control the tone of voice even when angry. That is a hard thing to do, but the more we practice it, the more we can do it. And again, setting our minds in advance. Being angry does not give anyone the right to yell or curse. Did you get that? Being angry does not give anyone the right to yell or curse. Because when you do, you're degrading yourself and you degrade the other person you're talking to. Now, I grew up in a family where my parents did not cuss or curse. They never did. And I came home from school one day and I tried out a word at the dinner table. And my father jumped down my throat. And he explained to me what that word meant, which I had no clue what it meant. I just tried it on, like a new outfit. Well, I heard this other person at school try it on, so I think I'll try it on too. And he let me know that was unacceptable. And he said, if you get into the habit of using curse words, then you lower your standard. He said, you want to maintain a standard of conduct. People will look at you differently how you speak. And he said, if you don't ever get in the habit of using foul language, you will do far better. And it was a nice heart-to-heart talk. The whole family's around the table. There were 8 of us all together, and I'm the one, just sinking in the seat as I'm getting this explained to me, but it stuck with me for my lifetime. I've never been one to use that kind of language, and even when you're angry, that's when it slips out the easiest. If you've gotten in the habit of doing that, when you are angry, I can guarantee you it's going to pop out of your mouth. So that's where you practice it in the other times. And then when you get to that point, you've already set your mind in advance not to allow those words to come out, because you can have a little 3-year-old at school that tries on this language because they heard mommy say it the day before, And now you hear it as a teacher and you're going, where did that child learn? So we can pass these things on, or we can help our children make better choices and always raise ourselves up to a higher standard. Okay, so let's go on. Teach your child from a young age to use the phrase, I love this phrase, I would highlight it and put it to use. Thank you for pointing that out to me. Let's all say it together. 1, 2, 3. Thank you for pointing that out to me. One more time. Thank you for pointing that out to me. Nobody can fight with that. That is like end of discussion. And you don't want to say, thank you for pointing that out to me. You want to say it sincerely, humbly, respectfully. Thank you for pointing that out to me. You're making me think. I've got my thinking going now. This is great. I can put that to practice in my life. So thank you for pointing that out to me and correct it, because nobody will argue with that. For example, when speaking to someone in authority, a child should never raise his or her voice, curse, or strike out. Never curse, never raise your voice, never strike out to an authority. That goes against everything in society today, because society promotes raising your voice. It certainly promotes cursing as like a common language. And then striking out. Look at those girls in that store. It's become an acceptable behavior. We're going to get into respect next chapter, and I can't wait to get there, because it shows how society has degraded in this common courtesy. It's like basic social skills that used to be common to everyone, and today you find it dissolved about every facet of society. As a matter of fact, I would say that disrespect, if it were a disease, would be a pandemic today. It is at a full pandemic today. So let's go to the next one. C. Never accept violence, verbal or physical, as an option to deal with anger. It's not on the table. Violence of any kind, aggression of any kind, should never be an option on the table. Never even allow it to get there. Children who are taught to respect others and their property, even when they are angry, will not be the ones perpetuating violence and aggression. Those children, those girls, were not taught this principle. They knew just the opposite. And where did they learn that from? Social media, Hollywood, entertainment industry. You could put a whole bunch of things into that pocket there. And again, probably parents that didn't know any better, and they didn't know how to train them the right way. Emphasize that anger is no justification for disrespect or violence of any kind. And you can see when you think about serial killers, they started at a very young age. And typically serial killers started with little insects and cats and, small animals. And then it built over time to where they hurt bigger animals, or they picked on their siblings, or whatever it might be. And then it eventually exploded into this situation where people fell victim without even realizing what they were dealing with. So use character to find a solution when children are angry. And I put above that the peaceful solution. Find a peaceful solution when children are angry. Ask your child what positive character trait should they display to solve the problem. Have your child talk about ways that using that positive trait could bring about a peaceful solution. And you can do this with children. You can do it in the classroom. You can do it at home. Have a basket with all the positive character traits in it. You've got two siblings in a conflict. Go to the basket, pick out what character traits you need right now. One might need the humble one. One might need the patient one. And then when they pick up those cards out of the basket, then they can have a discussion and say, okay, now we've got a way to solve the problem. It can help. It can help in a lot of ways. And number 4, let go of anger. That is so important. We as adults need to learn to let go of our anger, and we need to demonstrate for our children how to let go of anger. Teach your children not to hold on to anger. And you know who that hurts? It's yourself. It's only ourselves. When I think about forgiveness, because letting go of anger means forgiving, right? When we forgive for ourselves. We're doing that for ourselves. It benefits us. The other person might even not know. You might never have an expression of being able to say, I forgive you. That person might be in the grave. It could be a situation in another area. It could be over social media, whatever it is. But when you say, I forgive, I'm letting it go, that is for you. And that helps you be a healthy individual. When we hold on to anger, we are more likely to behave immorally by hurting ourselves. Did you get that? So it falls back again on hurting you. You think you're going to hurt the other person because you can't let go of this? I just can't believe every time I get around that person, I look at her and I just feel. No, let it go. Because that's you it's hurting. That is you it's affecting. It's the mental attitude right here in the mind that is causing the most damage. That other person might not even know you're that upset with them. They might not even have a clue. But why drag it on? You want to carry that baggage of all those hateful thoughts around with you your whole life, and then they're going to follow you, and you're going to be a miserable person. You would be a miserable person. So teach children at a young age how to let go of anger. And I want to bring that point, let me go to it real quick here. It's in the self-control unit, and it's on page 111. I have a little sheet here, if I can pull it out. It says, the choice is yours. Okay, so let's look at this for a minute. It takes courage and strength of character to practice self-control when you are being deliberately provoked. And again, that's your own perception, but you could feel that you're being deliberately provoked. You must set your mind in advance to use positive communication and respond peacefully even when you are being antagonized. Once you have responded appropriately and found a peaceful solution, give yourself credit for having made the right choice and avoid a crisis situation, and then let it go. Now, we're all women in here. We know our minds can race over something. Raise your hand. You can have a situation and it'll replay. You wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's still replaying. 3 days later, it's still replaying in your mind. Anybody else have that? Everybody's hands up, right? That is such a normal thing to do. But when you can learn to let it go and not let it become a grudge, not let it build over time where it becomes hate, not turn to retaliation, then you're helping yourself. You're freeing yourself up, and it just feels so much better. Don't replay the incident over and over in your mind. If the person who antagonized you caused you to feel embarrassed or afraid, then or angry, whatever emotion you want there, then deal honestly with those emotions by talking about it with a friend or a trusted adult. If you hold on to these emotions, you can begin to have negative thoughts about yourself and about the person you had the conflict with. This will cause you to feel frustrated and resentful. If you are not careful to guard your mind and you focus on the negative incident, you could seek to get revenge. And I wonder, once we find out what occurred with that situation at that store, were they seeking revenge? Had they had a situation previously that led up to them and they didn't learn to let it go? And so now they're retaliating on this poor person at the store? And you can see how many scenarios could play in the mind with a situation like that. Okay, so let go of anger. Don't hold on to it. So now we're going to go down to a few ways you can teach your children to let go of anger. Here we go. Encourage children to use self-talk to help them control their thoughts. Now, we're talking to ourselves all the time. I know we all do. Some of us might talk out loud. I do that sometimes. So that's okay. It's all right to talk to yourself. But watch your language. Watch how you talk to yourself. Show yourself respect. Be kind to yourself. Don't think so evil about something that gets you all riled up, because it hurts your heart. It hurts your whole physical body. Next point, be merciful to others and forgive to avoid retaliation. You've got to avoid that retaliation. 2 wrongs will never make a right. 2 wrongs will never make a right, and 3 wrongs make a fight. So if you just keep feeding into it, it will end in a major conflict. Focus on calm, positive thoughts. Those are cool thoughts, right? And those are okay to have. You have to train your brain to think cool thoughts, because our natural tendency without the peaceful solution training is to go negative every time. So we have to really work with our minds and say, wait, and I'll even say out loud, I reject that thought. I do not accept that thought. And there's power in that. It might sound funny, but it's true, and it really works. Try it. Because we can have those thoughts, and if we don't push them out, then they will stay there and they'll settle in. And then before you know it, that thought pops up. You got this whole little path made of this thought that is going to set itself in your mind. And I know, working with the Peaceful Solution for many, many years, there are people that are old, I'm not old, that they can have thoughts of their childhood that they still carry with them to that point. And when they open up to learning the Peaceful Solution, they can say, I had known this as a child. I have resentment for my father clear back here when I was a little girl, 6 years old. And the Peaceful Solution freed them up to be able to let go of that and change the thought process. And it all begins in the mind. Okay, try to see things from the other person's view and be compassionate. The world is sorely lacking compassion and empathy. Learn not to take the behaviors of others personally. Don't take it to heart. Oh, you know how they are. Just bump with it. As I say, let it bounce off you like a ball. Don't take on ownership of it. Find a way to see humor in the situation. You know, laughing is very healthy for us. Accept the fact that, like them, others have difficult times too. We all go through difficult situations. Count the ways they are thankful for that person or situation to be in their life. Thankfulness, I try to start my day and end my day with thankfulness. It's very, very important. Handle anger correctly to develop positive moral character, and accept that life might not always seem fair, but that they will always have peace of mind, peace of mind, peace of mind, if they practice moral values from the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program. And don't we all want peace of mind? Don't you like to be able to put your head down on the pillow at night and know, I did okay today. I practiced self-control. I didn't yell at my child when my child did ABC. I learned to keep self-control when such and such occurred. And I didn't lash out with my tongue. As parents, we can train our children to succeed in all aspects of life, but we cannot teach what they do not know and what we are unwilling to practice. That's a powerful statement. So it's our fault if our children are acting out and we're not educating them, first by our example, and second, because we are not willing to practice it ourselves. And that's the hardest part. But you know what? You can do it. Take those baby steps. It's just little baby steps. They're okay to take. When it comes to self-control, we must have a do as I see and as I do attitude. We must be what we want our children to become, because they are looking to us as parents, teachers, providers, and role models to be an example for them to see. And you want to learn, you want to earn their trust. You know, everybody deserves respect, but we have to earn trust. And so as parents, we can help our children learn to trust us. As adults, we can help our youth to learn to trust us. And it begins by what we're learning in this chapter. First, demonstrating it with ourselves, taking the time to listen to them and ask, are you okay? Do you need help? What are you going through? How do you feel? You know, just asking someone, how do you feel, can really help them a lot, okay? So we've come to the end of this Procedure 7. We'll have to pick up on Procedure 8 to close this chapter next time. But I hope this has been of benefit to you, and we always enjoy teaching you. Have a great week, everyone.